Hello and welcome to this live conversation on Maqala Foresight. Our guest tonight is Getachew Reda, Executive Committee member of the TPLF. Getachew, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
In line with what was just broadcast, the national government of Tigray, in its current affairs statement of position, started its reminiscence with the injustices committed by the imperial and military regimes, and I quote, conspiring with external actors with the sole purpose of bringing the people of Tigray to their knees. And it goes on to equate it to the actions of the current group in power in Addis Ababa. Would you please elaborate?
Well, it speaks for itself. There have been efforts in the past to subjugate the people of Tigray through all means fair and foul. That was the case during the imperial regime. That was the case during the Derg era. And unfortunately, that's also the case when, in fact, people expect reform and all kinds of 21st century political amenities, as it were. We are now faced with a challenge where a leader who is very much obsessed with Ethiopia's unwholesome imperial past wants to try and subjugate the people of Tigray. And well, like I said, it speaks for itself.
Given the dalliance between Isaias Afwerki and Abiy, one can understand the motive against the people of Tigray. But how can one even think of using the Northern Command for these sinister motives?
Well, the Northern Command is so far insulated from the kind of atrocities that have been perpetrated by security forces in the country, in many parts of the country. Thanks in large measure to the fact that this particular command has been working closely with the regional state government, and more importantly, there has little in the way of events that pitted the Northern Command against the people of Tigray. The Northern Command has been working hand in glove with the people and government of Tigray. But for Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki, TPLF and the people of Tigray are the only things that stood in the way of their authoritarian ambitions, not just in Ethiopia and Eritrea, but also beyond in the region. So they have ambitions which even pale in comparison to America's hegemonic ambitions, as some of our friends suggest. So they would use any entity, they would try and use any entity or any force at their disposal to that end. So we're not saying Northern Command has been at their service in this regard. Northern Command has been very consistent. It's been working with the people of Tigray. It's been working with the people of Ethiopia in defense of the territorial integrity of the country. That's one thing. But the last issue, the strangest thing is, the Northern Command has seen in a sort of musical chairs orchestrated by Abiy Ahmed. It has seen it about 3 commanders in probably half as much time, which is very strange, because commanders are not supposed to be removed or relieved from posts at will, and you expect, especially in this part of the world where conflagrations can start any minute, the commander should have a modicum of familiarity with his forces, and that was not meant to be. The first commander was removed because Abiy didn't like his disposition, and then he appointed someone he thought would be suitable for his purposes. But I remember the commander, one of the Northern Command commanders, was being attacked for doing something within the territorial limits of Ethiopia, because Isaias Afwerki complained about some war games they were conducting in Adiabo. It was very strange. I mean, Isaias, because I was there when that happened. It was Defense Forces Day, and the most normal thing for the Defense Forces Day, during Defense Forces Day, for the Defense Forces to do is to conduct some kind of war games. But Isaias immediately considered it an affront, and then that was communicated to Abiy, and Abiy took orders, and he raised hell. It is strange. I mean, Eritrea, I know, is a country of proud people, but a small country. A guy who has never done anything for his people, and he has every opportunity to dictate terms in Ethiopia. So the Northern Commander was relieved of his position simply because he wasn't perfectly suited for Abiy's purpose. So another commander was assigned, and that commander was also working with the people. So he was very much clear on his mission, which is to protect Ethiopia's territorial integrity, and not to threaten or to arm wrestle with the people of Tigray or TPLF. That was not his mission, because the defense forces are not there to settle political scores between two parties. If anything, the defense forces would and should remain neutral in the event that there are political differences between and among parties in the country. But the other commander, the third commander, was also relieved from his position simply because he wasn't perfectly suitable for the kind of purpose Isaias and Abiy hoped he would be ready, or he'd be willing to discharge. So what we are saying is, okay, Abiy has had carte blanche when it comes to using the security forces to suppress dissent. He has had a carte blanche using the security forces to kill and maim hundreds of people at will. He has a carte blanche to use the security apparatus to incarcerate and to jail thousands of opposition members, thousands of innocent youth and women. But that's not meant to be. So what we are saying here in Tigray is, especially after the expiry of Abiy's legitimate authority, what little was left of his legitimacy did expire on the 5th of October. So no political decision of significant political, military, whatever consequence is not going to be acceptable in Tigray. That we have made it clear from day one. So for Abiy to try to restructure the Northern Command and to move forces at will when his legitimacy has already expired, that would amount to abdication of our responsibility. So we said no, that is absolutely unacceptable. The Northern Command is here to protect the territorial integrity of the country, not to serve Tigray. Well, in fact, we have no problem defending ourselves. We have no problem defending ourselves. But no amount of shenanigan between Isaias and Abiy should be allowed to create the kind of situation where the Northern Command, which is technically here to defend the territorial integrity of the country, would be moved to other parts of the country where it would be busy killing children. So in effect, what we are trying to do is not to impose movement we're not sort of imposing the right of movement of the Northern Command. What we are saying is no decision is acceptable that affects the movement, the structure, and the operational capabilities of the Northern Command, coming as it does after the expiry of Abiy's power on the 5th of October.
And that applies not just for Tigray, but to all.
It applies throughout the country, but we don't have control over the rest of the country. So what we are saying is, we will not countenance any move whatsoever that stands in the way of such a decision on our part. So we'll work closely with the Northern Command. So as far as we are concerned, the Northern Command hasn't gone through any change of personnel, any change of command, any change of whoever was in charge of the Northern Command. We technically consider still in charge. We'll never accept any troop movements that will detract from the Northern Command's responsibility, that also distract it from discharging its responsibility. That's our official position.
The statement of position of the government of Tigray also cautioned that if the group in power insists, having violated the constitutional right of the people of Tigray to cut the budget or suspend the budgetary subsidy, it will be tantamount to declaration of war.
Yes.
And the group in power not only decided to cut the budget, but also has started halting the infrastructural and social services as well to the people of Tigray. And the government has also called on the people to be vigilant and to mobilize themselves to defend their rights. Are we coming closer to an open conflict?
Well, we're already in an open conflict. If it wasn't for our reluctance to engage in a tit-for-tat game with Abiy's reckless clique, it would have been open season for people who have all kinds of intentions to even old scores with Ethiopia. As far as TPLF and the government it leads are concerned, the people of Tigray, we've been bearing the brunt of their reckless moves. The shenanigans between Isaias and Abiy has been running for the last almost 3 years. So it was the reluctance on our part to escalate that has carried the day, not their willingness to give peace a chance or a try. Now, having said that, Abiy is threatening to cut back on budget. This is strange because nowhere in the Constitution is there a right to any entity in the Ethiopian state, the House of Federation or the cabinet or whatever, to withhold budget, because our budget is a function of our membership in the union. It's a function of our membership in the federation. So even if we are at loggerheads with the party in power, a party in power in Addis, that shouldn't stand in the way of Tigray or Gambela or Amhara securing its budget, because their budgets are not the result of some kind of political convenience of the center, but the fact that it's a function of their membership in the union, in the federation. So Tigray is a member of the federation. Tigray collects taxes, and collects taxes responsibly, and sends it to the federal government, because the federal government, in accordance with the constitution, has a duty to bring all the resources together and then give it back to the regions. In this case, there could be regions whose economic infrastructure is underdeveloped, so much so they would have difficulty covering their costs. So the fact that we are coming together as a federation simply means that those who have excess resources would contribute a little bit of their resources to the maintaining of the federation. That's how it works, okay? So Abiy, as a former prime minister or as a Codillo, now as a generalismo in Arat Kilo with his Republican guards and everything, is doing what any bandit would do. is doing what any warlord would do. Because the resources are in Addis, and then he's telling us, because you don't like my way, you take the highway. That's not how it works. So he does that, and then that's an open war. So whether that will lead to confrontation is pretty much anybody's guess. As far as we're concerned, we want our people to get ready for any eventuality. And much as I wish to wish this away, it's very unfortunate. Crisis is staring us in the eye. It's staring us in our eyes, and I don't have answers. There are more questions here than answers. But the most important issue here is Abiy doesn't have a right, doesn't have the power to withhold budget, because it is money that I collect from Tigray that goes to the federal government and comes back in the form of budget. And then for all of a sudden, a warlord in Arat Kilo to tell me that he has every right to stop the resources, or he plays some kind of sick joke that he can send it to the Redas or whatever. Where does he find the Redas? He finds them simply because Tigray is part of the federation, and you don't deal with Tigray. You don't deal with specific Redas. But I know he has unitarist ambitions, and if he thinks this is his way of realizing his unitarist ambitions, he probably has the wrong people and the wrong region in mind. It's very unfortunate for him.
Yeah, very unfortunate also because this region has, taken the burden of war for centuries, and after a little short of 3 decades respite, to come back to war is really scary.
Yeah, like I said, that we have been bearing the brunt of most of the wars that Ethiopia has faced for the last 5-6 centuries has been unfortunate. That we paid probably disproportionately higher price in terms of lives lost, in terms of people maimed, in terms of infrastructures destroyed, in terms of dreams deferred. That is quite unfortunate. And what is even more unfortunate is to be almost arm twisted into confrontation and war with a cabal whose head came to power simply because we believed in peaceful transfer of power. And so some lunatic, some unhinged dictator with authoritarian ambitions comes to office, and then he thinks the only thing that stands in the way of his authoritarian ambition is the people of Tigray and TPLF, and then he wants to get rid of them, and he works in cahoots with a guy whose authoritarian ambitions, not just in Eritrea but also in the entire region, were frustrated by TPLF and the people of Tigray. They have now a common agenda, a common enemy, and then they're working together. But what they are doing is not just about TPLF, it's about, it is going to spell disaster to the nation at large. It's very unfortunate that I have to, at this point, I have to talk in terms of our being in a position to defend ourselves. We should have been discussing about deepening reforms. We should have been discussing about broadening democracy. We should have been discussing about maintaining our double-digit growth and all that. Okay, now Ethiopia, which was a proud nation with double-digit growth barely 2 years ago, is now a country teetering on the brink of disaster. And now we're talking about an unhinged dictator in the making, threatening to use force against his own people, and in fact working in cahoots with Ethiopia's implacable enemy. And it's very unfortunate, but simply because something is unfortunate doesn't mean we can wish it away. We can't wish it away. As I say, although we're not in any way belligerently seeking for confrontation, we cannot, however, escape the fact that there are people who are gagging for that confrontation. And well, it's now. I mean, I personally feel it's really painful to think that the people of Tigray, who, as you've said, have been bearing the brunt of all kinds of injustices for centuries, are now, after having spent an incredible amount of time and lives to extricate themselves out of poverty, out of bondage, are now being forced to fight for their self-determination. But fight they will, fight we will, and will prevail. That much I can assure you.
Immediately worrying thing also is the halting of the safety net program, which is very critical for maybe hundreds of thousands of people in Tigray, very poor people. Isn't this a violation of international law?
Well, we're dealing with an unhinged guy who has no clue whatsoever what international. I mean, the international community will have to accept its mea culpa, its responsibility in this regard. This unhinged guy was touted as a reformer. He was praised to the skies. He was given all kinds of titles. He was given all kinds of recognition, including the Nobel Peace Prize. And unfortunately for them, this guy doesn't have any clue what it means to live up to the expectation of the international community. So he thought he could take them for a ride. So in a way, the fact that he has an absolute disregard for international norms simply means he thinks every support they have given him as a carte blanche, as a blank check to lord it over the people of Ethiopia. But unfortunately for him, he first started by attacking what should have been his stronghold, attacking the Oromos left and right, and promoting an archaic unitarist agenda, which not even the most ardent of unitarists would have thought was possible in the 21st century. Ethiopia is a very diverse country. Diverse, so diverse that to even think of trying to unify these people by force is going to result in the absolute disintegration of the country. So the federal arrangement, if you have issues with the federal arrangement, how it works in terms of what impacts it has created, in terms of the kind of deficits we had, especially when it comes to strengthening a pan-Ethiopian sentiment and all that, this we could have tweaked here, tweaked the system here, tweaked it there, and then we could have come up with a much better arrangement. That's quite normal. But Abiy, a guy with very meager means intellectually, comes to power, and he thinks with the support of the international community and with the standing ovations he was receiving here and there, he thought he was capable of setting the clock back on Ethiopia's federal arrangement. That is an absolute disaster. Now, the international community has been, like I said, praising Abiy to the sky. So he doesn't consider the international community as an or its comment as an impediment to what he does. So safety net, this is probably one of the stupidest moves even any stupid person could make under similar circumstances. Safety net is about protecting the poorest of the poor among society. The money mostly comes from the international community. So for an illegitimate dictator in Aratkilo to try to withhold safety net money, which comes not from even from the Federation's coffers, but from the international community, to beat the people of Tigray into submission. And that obviously rubs the international community the wrong way. So now whether they withhold safety net money, whether they withhold budget, for me it's a simple technical difference. They have been withholding whatever they could the last 3 years. We've been fighting them tooth and nail, short of course, declaring an open war against them. So we've been surviving by all means we could, and we have been bearing the brunt of their reckless decisions. But it's not just about safety net. It's not just about budget. If Abiy thinks he can get away with it, he can withhold whatever is. I mean, he's been very consistently working on sabotaging the Afar corridor for a long time now. It's thanks largely to the people of Afar that he didn't succeed. So he'll continue. Isaias would work with him to block. They would do everything to sort of encircle Tigray into submission. That's not going to work. But let's not talk about the specifics. The international community has failed because it has never said a word against Abiy's reckless moves. Abiy cordoned off Oromia for more than a month after the days of Hachalu and killed hundreds of people on record. He shut down the internet and he killed people left and right. He turned all the schools that were closed because of COVID-19 into prisons. And none of the embassies in Addis, the US Embassy, the European Union, came up with so much as a brief statement expressing their concern. Forget denouncing Abiy. They didn't even express their concern. But I remember I was the information minister of the federal government at some point. You would have a case in a certain locality, in Oromia or Amhara or Tigray. The US State Department and the US Embassy and the EU would be falling over each other to come up with a statement denouncing the recklessness of Ethiopia's security forces. And diplomats cannot venture out of Finfinne, out of Addis Ababa, for fear of fear of security challenge. I mean, they could get killed. They could be lynched. Individuals are lynched in many parts of the country. And this government has been proudly incarcerating, jailing people who came to Addis because they sincerely believed in the reforms that ostensibly were being promoted by Abiy Ahmed. And none of the representatives of the international community have said anything at all.
So the statement invokes the what it calls legal and moral obligations of the international community. What are you expecting from the international community?
Well, I mean, my expectations are very, very modest, honestly. What I would expect the international community to say is to state the obvious, that Ethiopia is in the brink of disaster, that this unhinged guy is not a reformer. He is absolutely untrustworthy. He's made all kinds of promises to the people, to the West. He has made all kinds of promises to the Americans. He has made all sorts of promises. I mean, I can give you an example. President Trump is not a particularly intelligent person when it comes to international politics. President Trump is an absolutely transactional leader, which even Americans have difficulty fathoming. I mean, like, his leadership style is basically about promoting America's interest by all means necessary, fair and foul. Trump wanted Abiy to sign a deal with Egypt on the Renaissance Dam so he could he could boost his chance of getting re-elected by doing a favor to the Israelis, which is normal political practice in the U.S. So this dude Abiy agrees to the terms, and he sells out Ethiopia's interest, and then all of a sudden the people who were supposed to ink the deal saw the danger in it. The irrigation minister, including the foreign minister, are not particularly, I mean, I have differences with them, but they're not particularly interested in selling out the Ethiopia's interest. Well, as far as I understand. Abiy doesn't have any interest whatsoever in protecting Ethiopia's interest. All he's interested is the trappings of power. If he's not even interested in what can be done with power, he's more interested in just the trappings of power. He wants to be referred to as the Mr. President, Mr. whatever, that kind of stuff. And then the source of his legitimacy is not the people of Ethiopia or the will of the people of Ethiopia. His source of legitimacy is not his willingness to serve the interests of Ethiopia. His source of legitimacy is whether Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed thinks of him as a great leader, whether President Trump considers him a friend. These are the kinds of things that entice him into action. So he sells out Ethiopia's interests on the Renaissance Dam, but he reached a point where it was absolutely impossible for him to because the people of Ethiopia started asking questions. Now, he couldn't go ahead with his agreement. He had already signed an agreement. Now the actual implementation comes, and then he bails out. Now the question is, if you really noticed Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Abdel Hamdok in the phone conversation with President Trump, they tell President Trump, they try to reassure him that no, you shouldn't be worried. It's still optimistic, because Abiy is already trying to salvage his power by making a deal with them. He's not interested in placating the fear of Ethiopians. He's more interested in dramas. Anyway, this will continue unabated unless something is done about his leadership. As they say, something got to give.
That seems to explain what you wrote on social media, in that you seem to not to be bothered by what Trump said, but by the uproar among some sections of the Ethiopian society.
Look, what can I do about Trump? I could raise hell. I mean, I could get angry. Like I could say all kinds of things. I don't know. I can engage in battle cries after battle cries. What can I do about Trump? Nothing. We cannot do anything about Trump. But there is someone we can do something about. Abiy Ahmed, who gave the Renaissance Dam to Trump and to the Egyptians with a silver platter. And to the extent that there are people whose moves I can somehow influence, whose activities I can somehow impact, it's not going to be Trump. He doesn't give a hoot what I do. He doesn't know where Ethiopia is, for God's sakes. Trump doesn't have any clue where Ethiopia is, whether it is part of Egypt or part of Nigeria. He doesn't have any clue. Why would he care? Trump doesn't have any clue about Greenland. He proposed to buy Greenland, for God's sake. He thought it was some kind of golf course. I mean, why would I blame Trump? It's pointless for us to keep blaming Trump. Trump is a transactional leader who wants to secure. I mean, he fleeced $330 million out of the Sudanese. The Sudanese are economically in doldrums now. I mean, it would be absolutely unquestionable for a leader of the richest, the wealthiest nation on earth to milk out $330 million out of a very impoverished country such as Sudan in the pretext that he would remove its name from the list of state-sponsored states, terror-sponsoring states. Sudan, since the expulsion of Osama bin Laden in 1996, Sudan, there is no report whatsoever that Sudan has sponsored terrorism. In fact, CIA was working Omar Hassan al-Bashir for a long time after the expulsion of Osama bin Laden in 1996. But Trump comes and he congratulates Abdullah Hamdok for making the right decision to pay money so he could remove him from the list of state sponsors of terror. And this is Trump. And no amount of uproar by Ethiopians, big and small, left and right, conservative or liberal, is going to change his mind. He either has his way or it's a highway.
Coming back to the international community, why are they not calling a spade, as you said, while he is doing whatever he wants to do, even with their coffers?
Yeah,
do they suspect your intentions, like that you are going to secede, that you are going to incite war, that you are not backing the reforms? Do they have any suspicions?
I don't know.
What?
You know, it's strange. Some of them were enamored with the concept of reform, so they took reform seriously. The whole idea, broadening political space, and all that, and they were so in love with those concepts, so much so, they thought the only person who could deliver on those promises was Abiy Ahmed. Even after having realized that things have changed for the worse, they still cling on to that hope that maybe somehow there is an element, salvageable element to him. Second, there are also other entities among the international community who think that their interests, economic interests, could be better served with a guy who is ready to sell Ethiopia's interests without any compunction. There are countries who think in the short term there is some low-hanging fruit they can help themselves to. He can sell the telecom, he can sell Ethiopian Airlines and all those things. But it's very unfortunate. The fact that those entities have been successful is a function of the 100+ million people that Ethiopia has. Okay, that there is a relatively better economic outlook to the country. That there is a growing middle class. So Ethiopia is largely becoming a market, not just a net importer of goods, but also an exporter of goods, but also importer of goods. You know, that are the kinds of things that make any business deal with Ethiopia attractive. But the fact that this guy is fighting with people left and right simply means he's presiding over the disintegration of a country which only barely 2 years ago was considered one of the most promising nations on earth in terms of economic outlook. So, yes, some of them thought there was reform, and some of them think there is some benefit to it. But what both seem to be missing in all this is that Abiy is threatening whatever potential interests they could have gleaned from whatever arrangement there is as part of what they consider reform. And I think you see, when you judge people, you judge in terms of what your dealings with them are. So in psychology, I think there is this thing called fundamental attribution error. When you deal with a guy, a friend of yours who's a patron of the same joints that you spend in, you think of him as a generous person because he pays most of the bills every time, okay? But when you try telling this guy is generous story to his wife, who has to survive by the skin of her teeth because he only provides her with a meager amount of money. So your story that he's generous is not going to resonate with her. because her experience is absolutely different. So the fact that your friend is generous in a bar doesn't make him generous in the household. So that's the kind of dilemma the international community is facing right now. So Abiy is the most promising guy for them. Well, that is changing now. I know we've been dealing with diplomats once every while, and that understanding, thanks to his excellent record of sabotaging his own success, what little chance he had for success, he is very good at sabotaging it. Well, we voted for him, for God's sakes. TPLF voted for him, and TPLF wanted to work with him, wanted him to succeed. But he didn't want to succeed. So he thought the only way he can cement his consolidate his position is by attacking TPLF and dehumanizing TPLF and the people of Tigray. That, unfortunately, is not working, and it's not going to work.
And finally, hope you will answer this, as they say, standing on one foot, given the time. What needs to happen to avoid further de-escalation and even an open war or civil war happening in this country?
It's quite simple. For Abiy to realize that he is not capable of turning the tide at all, that none of his moves are going to result in the subjugation of the people of Tigray, that he has to submit to the people of Ethiopia that he is not capable of leading this country, that the only way out of this crisis, the only way out of this impasse is an all-inclusive national dialogue. Short of that, he can only precipitate his descent into hell. And as far as we're concerned, much as we wish to avoid conflict, we cannot, however, sit idly by when a guy was an unhinged guy with authoritarian ambitions keeps tearing away at the very fabric of our society. And we'll be more than willing to address this peacefully, but if push comes to shove, we'll also be more than ready to defend our autonomy, come hell or high waters.
Getachew Reda, Executive Committee member of the TPLF, thank you very much for coming live and giving us this very elaborate and timely interview.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, dear viewers. Thank you for watching, and this is goodbye.